everyone, and welcome. My name is Diane Royer with DXC, and I'm here at AWS reInvent right in Las Vegas. I've got to tell you, this is gearing up to be quite an awesome event, a real whirlwind. Imagine being here with 40,000 of your closest technology friends who are all excited and energized and just can't get enough of insight and information. And also, they're just starving to hear what we're going to be talking about at reInvent. So with that, I'm excited to say that we have two DXC experts and technologists here who is going to talk to you about reInvent and some of the technology forethought that they have in mind. And I'm just very excited to introduce them. So now I'm going to turn the mic over to JP Morgenthau, who is our CTO of Application Services. JP.
Hi there, and thank you, Diane. I'm here with Glen Robinson, who I'm going to allow him to introduce himself.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Glen Robinson. So I work for the Leading Edge Forum. DXC is our parent company. We're an independent research and advisory organization. We work with CXOs, and we provide insight through the sort of research we're doing. We're engaging with lots of organizations around the world. We're learning about next practice, so the sorts of things that they should be thinking about aspiring to becoming next. And we're teaching these CXOs, we're giving them frameworks, research, methodologies to sort of help on the journey to digital.
That's fantastic. Now, you're actually speaking this week here at reInvent, and can you tell us a little bit about what your topic is going to be about?
Yeah, definitely. So my talk on Thursday, it's at 11:30 in the MGM Grand. We've just done a piece of research called The Renaissance of the IT Organization. So we've been studying, I think a lot of research has been done on disruption in industry through technology, right? And there's lots been said about that. We've been looking specifically at technology and the impact on the IT organization. What does it mean to the IT organization? And of course, cloud technologies had a massive impact to the IT organization. Organizations like AWS now are providing a lot of technology as services, a lot of roles, responsibilities, the things that we used to do in IT are no longer necessary. They're being provided by the likes of Amazon.
Fantastic. You know, this is an exciting topic because I've been wondering for years how long our traditional IT organizations that grew organically for years were going to exist. It seems like we've never really addressed the organizational issue. So we're here at reInvent, right? And which is an Amazon show and leveraging the Amazon Web Services platform. I see that there's two different ways that you could leverage a show like this. You could simply focus on it as education for your technical engineering staff to come and learn the latest. But it seems that relative to what you've been researching, that maybe this show could be a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. So we talk about enabling executives with a matrix mindset. So we use the matrix as a metaphor to describe this sort of technology era that we're moving towards. It's a fabulous and exciting world that we'll be living in years from now, powered by machines and with the introduction of IoT. It's going to mean huge amounts of disruption, enablement and opportunity. So we talk about this matrix mindset, and I think reInvent, there's 40,000 people here, and you can sort of look around us today. There's a lot of engineers walking around, a lot of software developers, those sorts of roles are really, really well represented here, which is great. But when we talk to organizations, we also sort of think about, well, where's your CFO? Is he at reInvent? Where's your human resources leads, those sorts of people? Because when they come to a show like this, I think there's a real opportunity to learn more about, the financial constructs of cloud computing, the sorts of cost efficiencies you can get through cloud, what it means to the people in your organization as well. I think there's so many other sort of tangible aspects. So this isn't just it shouldn't be a developer conference. And I think when customers think about it and developing this matrix mindset, they need to think broader across their businesses, not just within technology.
That's a really great concept to have your CFO here, your CMO here, CDO here, right? Because they're able to not only survey what other companies are doing, but they're able to hear stories and learn from examples of a company that's been very, very strong in the market with being disruptive themselves.
Right, exactly. And you know what? I was talking to a guy over breakfast this morning, and he was talking about that there's a set of tracks here at reInvent and workshops actually this week where they are now doing a program called Working Back from the Customer. So Amazon are famous, right, for their customer-centric approach. Customer obsession is one of their core leadership principles. they've actually packaged up that IP and thinking process about how to do product development, product innovation, and are now actually bringing it out to their customers and offering these sorts of workshops. So this is definitely not just a show for engineers, right? If you can come and learn about those sorts of principles, about new forms of product innovation and product development, I think that's a huge change in the way business is done today and the way that organizations are structured. So those sorts of things are equally as interesting, I think.
That's fantastic. You know, as the app services CTO, right, my interest is obviously going to be the application, right? I still see a lot of emphasis when people look at the cloud, look at a company like Amazon Web Services, and they're looking at it as infrastructure. And it seems to me that that's really not in tune with what you're teaching around the matrix. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is quite a complex area. I think people don't understand all the sort of moving parts here. And because of that, a lot of organizations pick the easiest route, which is to pick up your applications, you know, your SAP, your Oracle, whatever it might be, even your custom applications, and you pick them up and you put them on a virtual machine. And you go, hey, that's great, right? It's out of our data center, it's out of our responsibility, we're going to get an amount of benefit. By doing that, they're inherently leaving so much benefit on the table. You know, we sort of talk about the sort of toxicity of the legacy in your environment and the sorts of, you know, that is eventually going to kill you, long-term contracts, huge amounts of capital investment. They're the sorts of things that constrain an organization from being a lot more agile. And in this world, we absolutely need more agile organizations who are going to sort of survive and thrive, right? So when you think of an application layer, are you going to get that agility by picking up your application and dropping it onto a virtual machine? You're going to get some benefit, right? And we know about it, like the architectural paradigms, the sort of...
But it's not a long-term benefit.
Right, exactly. You're going to get some sort of immediate return. Really, where you're going to start to see the benefits really come through is when you start adopting the more modern architectural paradigms, distributed architectures. You start moving up, consuming more of the platform-type services. So I know DXC, right? You guys talk a lot about platformification, the platform effects. I know you've got products and services around that. That's absolutely where a ton of value is, and then you can just keep moving up the layers. Amazon are famous for services like Lambda, so serverless, event-driven architectures. They're quite difficult. You can't just take a modern application, right, and just move it to Lambda. But there's components of an application that you can and get real, huge amounts of benefit from doing that.
Right, and this was not just off the hook. We kind of prepped last night. We had a fun little soundbite that came out of our discussion last night in prepping for this, right? We talk about the technical debt and how the organizations have been paying down this technical debt, and there's a margin call, right? And we called it the loan shark. And I think you said, they're going to, what did you say? They're going to come break your kneecaps now?
Well, it sort of feels like that, right? Because these organizations are almost doing self-harm, right? But they're sort of taking these loans, they're taking these debts, this technical debt, and they're not paying it down. And there's only going to be one consequence of that, right? Someone's going to come knocking on the door and they're going to come and do some real damage. Now, in business terms, that's organizations going out of business. It's losing market share. The more nimble, agile type organizations that we're surrounded by today, they're the guys that are going to come and eat your breakfast. You need optionality, right? You can't have those sorts of debts. They're going to kill your company. You need optionality. You need to be able to consume these new services, this new technology really rapidly. Like with the advances that we're seeing, machine intelligence and in IoT, just to name like two big areas that are sort of prevalent right now. I mean, there's so much new tech and new services. We're hearing a lot about that this week, the sort of announcements that we're expecting to come. If you're not in a position organizationally to rapidly adopt them and bring that value into your products and services, then your competitors are going to do that, right? And that's when you lose your kneecaps. That's when things start to get nasty.
It's true. This is the first time in years that I've seen companies really forced to examine their technical debt and start to think about it. It's why I think microservices architecture is starting to become more popular, is that people are finally having to address the monolith. I have this big investment in my organization in a particular application, in top to bottom, the stack that it's running on, the application itself, the cost, the labor, everything to run it and develop it, maintain it, and and it's been very difficult to go back to the business and say, we need to do that over, because we talk about the IT iceberg, right? And last night, one of the things we said is, in order to get this accomplished, the organization's going to have to lower the waterline on the IT iceberg in order to address that part that for years they've been kicking down the road saying, no, that's on the IT budget. I don't want to hear about that. That doesn't impact the business. You have to lower the waterline in order to approve this.
Yeah. So an organization has to have a strategy to deal with the legacy, right? So, and we use the term legacy, but I mean, realistically, some of that is modern infrastructure they've only just procured maybe a few years ago, and that's sort of fine, right? We're quite pragmatic. You're not going to pick up all your applications and run them on Lambda or on the next sort of big shiny platform that comes along, but you need to have a option in the business to consume those when the opportunity does arise. You need a strategy to start thinking about how we're going to deal with a legacy. So as part of the research that we've just done, I work with some really bold CIOs, and they were inspirational. CIOs, actually just as many CTOs as well. And these CTOs had really bold strategies about the legacy. They were using terms like, you have to be unsentimental about the legacy. So if a better way of doing something comes along, you might have just built something and invested a ton of money, but if you don't move to the newest, better technology, the long-term damage that's staying where you were to your business, it was sort of mind-boggling for these guys. Like we cannot do that damage to ourselves. We have to.
That's true. I actually have done a couple of talks now on microservices, and the first thing that, or one of the first things that I talk about with that is that you have to bring the business along, and it's a very different mindset because in the past, IT has always been oriented around if you need to redevelop that, if you need to throw something away, you failed. And that mindset of you failed, that's crippling in my opinion.
Definitely. So the cultural aspects of this shift that we're seeing are definitely the most difficult to deal with. The technology bit that we're here this week to sort of understand better what Amazon are doing and what their partners are doing is really interesting and exciting, right? But culture is really, really difficult to wrestle with. We're seeing that organizations start to talk about concepts like psychological safety, so how they enable individuals in their business to like work without the fear that you just described, to be able to go and try out new stuff, to potentially fail. In traditional businesses, there's still that sort of finger pointing that goes on, right?
It's devastating to moving forward.
Right, it's like how much did we just spend on that? Like, right, you're sacked. You're like, well, like we've got
exactly.
We've got to innovate, right? We've got to learn. We've got to create these opportunities as organisations. And if you don't have a culture that allows you to operate that way, then you're not going to see any innovation.
Well, I think big businesses always tended to allow companies like the Googles and the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world to rise up and do the innovation for them rather than do it themselves. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so I think if organizations actually understood that model and organizations that I've worked with, if you ask them that question, so yeah, we're using Amazon and we're getting a load of innovation come through every day without doing anything ourselves, that's great. That's at sort of the low level. But then you talk to them about innovation, like what are they doing in their industry, what are they doing with their customers. They have a focus there as well, but they're applying traditional operating models to that innovative part of their business. That's the bit that's now constrained. Business process is really slow. Funding doesn't come through fast enough. So there's many business models where you can have external people drive innovation for you on your behalf.
So we have questions. If I could actually read your handwriting. What do you want to actually read that for us?
How do CIOs help move employees along with new technology?
Oh, there we go. Okay. So actually, we're just discussing that, right? So what can CIOs do to actually foster an environment where employees feel safe to drive innovation? Because I've always talked to people, I'm always shocked. You look at a company, you don't see the innovation, you think the employees are kind of all part of the parcel of the culture of that's the way we do it, mindset, and you find people who are really like good thinkers, out of the box thinkers, and they just don't have the venue to discuss that. So, what can we do to help, change that?
Yeah, I think that the capability within organisations is generally not understood. Game of whack-a-mole, they're going to keep stifling innovation, then they're going to drive a culture inherently where people are just worried about stepping outside of the business process, trying new things, and that concept of like psychological safety just won't exist.
Do you call that in the LEF? Do you talk about entrepreneurship in companies?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. So we see lots of organisations internally almost running themselves like VCs. So they look at sort of budgets that they've got, and they think, well, how can we better apply this budget within the organisation? So hey, look, we've got a fund, and we can allow people to come in and ask for that money. And then you suddenly get this bottom-up groundswell of people who are just awesome people in a business doing a job, but they've got a ton of other skills, a ton of other insight they can bring, and all of a sudden the business starts to benefit. But they need to be able to tap into that in a meaningful way. And there's plenty of good existing models like the VC model where we see that happening every single day, right?
Yeah, we talked about one yesterday as well, the whole idea of meritocracy, if you will, right? I educate myself, I keep myself abreast, I study and learn the latest, so I should have the opportunity to go and find the best, most interesting work in the organization, and the company has to be aligned to allow that to happen.
Yeah, sure. And you're absolutely right. So we talk about, in the LEF, we did a little bit of research earlier this year about how to unleash talent in the organization. And some of the big sort of themes there were about, and actually some really great organizations were doing a sort of self-directing teams. So these were teams that were sort of self-forming, will go and find their own set of problems to go and deal with, that they could bring their skills and their capability to go and address. Like, these sorts of concepts you don't find in most big organizations, right?
Not yet.
Not yet, but they're the sorts of things that we're seeing more and more of that is becoming really exciting.
Somebody asked, what is the LEF, which you did announce when we came on. Maybe they joined late, but that's okay. Tell us again what the Leading Edge Forum is.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the Leading Edge Forum is a research and advisory business. We're completely independent. DXC is our parent company, so we're really privileged to be here this week and help support you guys. We work with executives around the world on next practice. So we're looking, and me specifically, I'm looking at technology, the sorts of next practices, the skills, the structures, the operating models, the cultures we just talked about, all those sorts of dimensions, and how technology's having a real impact there. What does that look like? And then we go and work with CIOs, and we give them frameworks to think about those challenges. We give them our research, and then we provide advisory services where we go in and we can help them on that journey.
That's excellent. I actually think that this has really been a fun conversation. Thank you. And Diane, do you have any final notes? Otherwise, hey, everybody, have a great day. And signing out from Las Vegas.